Hey there, welcome to ATL and 29, a podcast that looks at the NBA from the starting point of Atlanta. My name is Kevin Chenard. We're recording on a Sunday night. I'm here with Glenn Willis, and I guess maybe the appropriate course of action here is to ask you about the Falcons season.
Yeah, people seem upset. So I'll leave it
Fair
at that.
enough.
I think people get a little I don't know, impatient and so just hope for a better year next year. But I think people had high expectations with the signing of Kirk Cousins and all that sort of stuff, and he never looked healthy to me, even though they said all along he was healthy.
Right.
Um that's how it goes sometimes. So we look forward to next year.
They got the young players to make it happen sometime soon.
I mean, Penix looks good. Great arm. Um, Considering he's played 3 games, I mean, the poise and the reads and, not really putting the ball in a bad spot. I know some people said his accuracy, but he kind of had a rotating set of receivers, the different receiver set each game and stuff like that. For me, you look at him and Drake London and Bijan and the offensive line, the way they manage the ground game, at least stuff like that. And it's something to build from. I think they have a lot to fix on defense. I mean, that's me being Captain Obvious. They had some injuries, key spots there, but they still like um, their secondary really can't play man except for one guy, and it's hard for them to blitz because they don't have the coverage capabilities on the back end. And then this is me. I was a starting quarterback at high school a million years ago. I have a DED in NFL, I think, and not compared to my NBA stuff. But at a high level, I think they know what they have to work on and fix, and we'll see if they can execute that plan for next year. So I still think overall it's a fun season. Seeing young guys come into roles and progress, I think, is something to be encouraged about. I'm not despondent over the outcome of this. Yeah, I mean, doing great to get a playoff game experience for the new quarterback and all that sort of stuff. But I think there's reasons to be excited. Long time. I mean, I'm a long time Falcons fan and supporter and stuff like that, and people who are like, "Man, it's the same stuff all the time." 500 team. I understand where that comes from. Totally. I'm not going to tell someone you're being ridiculous if they're like, "I'm frustrated with always just being mediocre." There's a lot of truth to that. But I think they have an exciting young core group to start building from that they haven't had since Matt Ryan was early in his career and some of the guys they had back then. So me, I try to be optimistic, but that's not for everyone.
I didn't watch a lick of the Falcons game. I was at the Skyhawks game,
Yeah,
and
you were probably having a better experience. You for sure were having a better experience, I would think.
maybe I don't know. That was I
Time
think
of
that was
day,
their
setting
most.
setting aside time of day,
What's that?
setting aside time of day for you.
Oh, yeah, but I think that was maybe their most encouraging win of the season.
Yeah.
I don't know if everybody watches the Skyhawks on a regular basis, but from watching the Hawks, I think everybody knows that when your opponent shoots 40%, 45%, 50% from three, that's a tough game to win when the other team gets hot from three. And, the Skyhawks, by all accounts, were playing a reasonable brand of defense. They were certainly scrambling for loose balls. They were disruptive in transition and all that. And the Wisconsin Bucks still were just shooting a super high percentage from three to just keep them in the game. And the Skyhawks just never let that get to them. Every time the lead would close, they'd build it back up again. Um, they have a very deep team. Like they have 7 or 8 players who are like extremely intriguing. They feel like, sort of G League plus level caliber players. And this one, though, they've had pretty good depth all season, but this felt like the first really good game of the season for Mo Gay and Nico Jurisic. And they were doing it together. Like they were going on in at the same time, coming out at the same time. They were running pick and roll together. If Nico was running, actions with someone else, he was still finding Mo Gay in the corner. Like it was very much the two of them together, and they were the two that sort of propelled the team beyond just kind of keeping even with the Bucks. Like that was when the leads extended. Like there've been a lot of times this season where Nico would come in and the lead would collapse. Today it was just the opposite. You know, whenever Nico came in, the lead got bigger. Like it was very promising, and he was, running the point, which is something that he's seemed very capable of from the beginning. But today, the defense was there. And he said afterward that it's a little bit, both he and coach said that it's a little bit different for him this season because he's never really been a point guard before, but more importantly, he's never really defended point guards, and that's something that they're asking him to do, and he feels like he's starting to pick that up a little bit, and the evidence was there. Like it was night and day what he was doing in this game compared to some previous games. So I thought it was a really encouraging win, given that not only did they win, but they won when the opponents were shooting lights out, sort of beyond expectation.
Yeah, that's encouraging to hear. I've seen like five of their games so far. Just it still totally depends on my schedule and how many billable hours of work I'm doing during a week and all that sort of stuff. But I mean, he has the frame that you'd want to kind of develop into a point of attack defender and a guard defender. I talk all the time, like you don't want guys like Hunter size and Jalen size all the time on guards because it's just a lot of work for them at that size. But he's got that nice little, he's what about 6'5", 6'4", 6'5"?
That's not
Is
what he
he?
said. He gave me like his height and weight today, and I don't want to misquote it, but I was like, "Well, geez, that's big."
He's 6'7", or like what did he tell you?
I want to say that he said his weight was 240,
Okay. Oh, I no, I believe that. I mean, I don't know if like
and so
he,
let's.
he's a strong
He's
dude.
6'8". Yeah, he's listed at 6'8". I thought he said
Really?
maybe he said 214, not
Okay.
240.
Yeah, 240. That's like the
So
just a little
6'8",
bit shy of the
214. Maybe that's
Braun
what he said.
weight.
I have to go back and listen.
Yeah. Yeah, I would. I mean, I'd have to go back and look at like other where what he was listed at elsewhere. Because 6'8" seems bigger to me. But maybe that's with shoes and all that sort of stuff and everything. So I don't. Yeah, I'd be surprised if he was actually quite 6'8". I need to see him standing next to Onyeka. Onyeka's the guy right you want to put him next to Onyeka to figure out how tall exactly he actually is. And that sort of stuff. But and then I mean, I think I mean I know that you and I both think that Mohammed Gay, if he can get his body right, could really grow into being just a slasher, a guy who could cover a ton of defensive ground, has good verticality and stuff like that. And the real key for him is staying healthy, you know. And maybe that's a little bit true of Juricic too. And hope that those guys can kind of get a good, long, sustained run and be meaningful players on the Hawks roster at some point in the not too distant future, hopefully.
Yeah, it's interesting. We've got. I kind of want to discuss both of the Los Angeles games. I'm trying to think, what's a better
What's it
order to
called?
approach them in? I guess maybe we start with the Clippers game. That was the one sort of most recent in memory.
Sure.
Okay. What are your, I guess first, what are your overall impressions?
Ball handling issues. I mean, it's kind of funny. I put on Twitter and Blue Sky. It just seems like the last 3, 4 games, whatever it is, that teams are like, oh, when Trey doesn't have the ball, we can get really aggressive and force turnovers. And their teams are loading multiple defenders up the floor towards those ball handlers and just really kind of creating ball pressure. And it's really starting to show how underdeveloped at this point guys are. Like Veit had a really hard time. Even when Garrison had the ball, they made Garrison dribble, a lot more than what isn't, I think, in design for his role in a lot of cases. Dyson tends to do okay. I think better. I think he's had a little bit more international experience and kind of dealt with some of that before. Um, and then the other aspect too is just Jalen is a helpful outlet for the more average or below average ball handlers to be able to kind of work with around that, not having him. And so it's I mean, I know I put on like the score in the half court, which was me just taking a very rough cut from NBA.com, was like the Hawks actually outscored the Clippers in the half court. Now the Hawks had a lot more
That's
half-court
not, yeah, they
possessions,
have a lot more half court possessions.
but yeah, I know I was oversimplifying, but the point I was trying to make was that the points Clippers had off turnovers really was the difference in the game, you know. And that's a bit of an oversimplification, maybe a lot of oversimplification. But the Hawks defended in the half court okay enough. I mean, it was still pretty ugly for a lot of possessions. But if they hadn't just given up so many free points in transition off turnovers, the Hawks probably at least keep it to a 8 to 10 point game in the fourth quarter, maybe have a shot. But the Lakers did that, the Nuggets did that, the Clippers did that. Just loading up ball pressures on the Hawks non-Trey ball handlers, and it's been ugly the last 3 games.
So what what can they do? Like, is it something that they could do within the constraints of the roster that they have now? Do they have to get more creative? Do they have to make a move? Like, what do they have to just, is it simple as just making sure they have Keaton just so that they have a in-game substitution that they could make to change the pace if they need it? Like, what do they have to do?
By the way, I'm going to circle back here at the combine, draft combine. Yours is with 6'7" without using 208.8. So,
Okay.
um, there you go. I mean, for me, um, if you have Jalen, it's like not quite as urgent, because Jalen can really move the ball. He has an advanced handle for a power forward, but that doesn't solve the backup power forward issues. And on top of that, it's hard for us to know, you know, can Jalen play every game now? Or I mean, when he played against the Lakers, he looked like he was in a ton of pain in that game. You could just see the pain kind of on his anytime he would have any contact or whatever it was. And so that's a little bit discouraging. But for me, I mean, I think Keaton would help. Keaton just a more experienced point guard than Veet, by a lot, you know, and Keaton played a lot of point guard in professional circles, and he's been in the NBA environment for a number of years now. And I know that that's like players at Keaton's level, there are trade-offs. You're always dealing with trade-offs, but Keaton gives you a ton of defense. And just, if they force the ball out of Trey's hands or Beat's hands or Dyson's hands or whoever, Keaton might be playing with, I trust him to not just kind of cough the ball up. He's just going to be kind of responsible with it and professional with it. It's not going to, create some, dynamic drive and things like that, but he knows how to
No.
create a play touch and kick. And, he has a little floater he can get to and things like that. He's going to just kind of keep it pretty simple. Where, I mean, Beat, like, it was like he couldn't dribble or pass, against the Clippers, in that setting. And so for me, I know Hawks fans are like, hey, trade deadline's right around the corner. What can they do? Is there a move that they can make? And they turn the Zeller roster spot into a guard who can kind of come in and play, you know, in that spot. I do think that, and there's an interesting conversation to have around is backup power forward a bigger priority, or is point guard a bigger priority, or backup point guard a bigger priority? But for me, I think the ball handling gap is the biggest kind of most urgent thing to fix. And they have to understand not all teams are equally capable of generating ball pressure. Like the Suns don't generate a ton of ball pressure, and not like the Clippers. I mean, Clippers throw Terrence Mann at you, and you know, Norman Powell. The Clippers have a lot of guys that can defend. And things
Right.
like that. I'm not so worried about that against Phoenix. I'm not so worried about that against Utah. Coming up. So hopefully they'll be able to navigate those games. But between now and the trade deadline, which is we're like 34 days away, or yeah, I guess it's a month from tomorrow. I think if I'm doing the math right, it's a month from tomorrow. 30. So we're looking at 32 days, I think. Um, hope that you do better until you can figure something out. I don't know. What do you think?
I forget which question we're addressing. I sort
What
of
do you
think
do
that
about the
back
turnovers?
Okay. I'm think you also mentioned at some point is it really the point guard or the power forward spot that's more of a problem?
Yep.
And I think just sort of overall, if you account for all the two ways and everybody on the roster, I think the power forward is more of an issue. I think all season long, like the numbers when Jalen Johnson's not on the floor, the results of games when Jalen Johnson hasn't played, they're all just kind of catastrophic. And it's perfectly fine when Jalen plays to have DeAndre Hunter as your backup power forward. Like that works. That's great. But when he doesn't play and those 34 minutes of game of excellent power forward play go away, there's just nobody else. Like it feels a lot like to me like last season and the problems of last season. Especially, you know, I don't know how exactly, maybe it's just sort of overall the quality of play goes down and offense suffers and you don't get to set up your defense, and then you don't have point of attack defense, and then the rotations behind it fall apart. But whatever, some sort of trickle effect thing. But, it just it reminds me of what they had going last season where it was you don't stop the ball on defense. You're in rotation too much. You've got these forwards on the back line who are not not good at rotating, not good at protecting the rim, not good at closing out. They're all just sort of undersized, and it's just a hot mess defensively. I think, when we opened and we talked about defense, you talked about half court defense. I felt like you were being more optimistic than I was about what they looked like in half court and defense last game, and it just to me, I think the power forward issue is a little bit bigger of a deal. I just seems like it's an utter collapse in that respect. Whereas in, point guard, V was terrible in the Clipper game, but I don't think that if you get pressed into using him for one game here or there, that it's quite as nightmarish. I think they're underusing Keaton Wallace because I feel like he should have been on this trip and,
Yep.
when teams do force you to make a change in game, even if it's not the rotation you were planning for that game, if you're down a point guard and that's pretty much where the Hawks are for the remainder of the season until they do something. Like if you need to make that in-game curveball change, just okay, the pressure is amped up. We need somebody to just kind of navigate, get us into sets, and hopefully if we get quickly into a set because they were pressuring, now we've got the advantage. Like Keaton Wallace, I think can be good at that. Like I feel like they can kind of triage the point guard spot a little bit better than it's that doesn't mean that they shouldn't make a move. I just think that, if you got to try to manage a problem situation for a week or 2 weeks here or there, I think they have more answers for point guard than for what they have for that backup power forward spot.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and the David Roddy, the defensive minutes kill you, right? He can't. I mean, you can't play David Roddy defensively. You just can't. I mean, it just doesn't work.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Um,
I mean,
and
I was watching College Park today and I'm like, this guy would be a better answer defensively at power forward than
yeah, yeah,
and I'm not, obviously the skill level is different. Like the Wisconsin Bucks are not the Los Angeles Clippers, and I'm
right.
accounting for that. Like even accounting for that, it just quicker, more aware, more height, just better spatial awareness. Like it was just, I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't understand how they can keep going to that time after time, and you know when I get frustrated by it and you're like, well, he's not allowed to, you tell me he's not allowed to do the things that he's good at. And I agree, he's not. And it's
yeah,
unfortunate, but it's just, you,
yeah,
he's
yeah.
one player and they need a different player. Like it's not a match for their needs at this point.
Yeah, I mean, defensively, I mean, you'd have to get him to like the three was a different. You'd have to have like some positional versatility to kind of get him out of being low man all the time. He just has no verticality to apply there, um, and just doesn't really have the foot speed for that. On offense, he's best in short roll. He's best making plays on the move. And team with Jalen, the Hawks run a lot of guard short roll. They short roll Dyson. They short roll Hunter as a three. They short roll Dyson. When the Congo's playing well, sometimes they'll short roll. I mean, Roddy is just never going to get to do the things offensively that he's good at. Now, he'll play on the catch. He's good playing on the catch. He's good 0.5, on the catch. But that's more of like a B minus skill, I think. He does it good enough. But I mean, if you go back and look at the video breakdown I did when the Hawks acquired him, like there's a ton of video of him short rolling and making awesome decisions on the move, pinpoint passes and stuff like that, which is great if there's room for him to do that, on the floor. But those opportunities aren't there, and so it's hard to kind of manifest the value that he could give you, around the current rotation constructions. It's not going to happen.
Yep. And you know, for the Hawks and for David Roddy, like to me the frustrating part is like it's partly mental. Like mental's not the right word, but it's partly like it's a learned thing. And he's learned it on offense. Like he's learned where the help defense goes. Where is the help coming from? Who's going to end up being open on this play? Needs to make, move one step this direction or one step that direction. And if they're not where they're supposed to be, where to take advantage of it. Like he knows that on offense. And yet, obviously he has physical limitations on defense. He's just not that tall. He's not an explosive leaper but to me a lot of it's just like positioning, like where would he best be situated to be ready to make these adjustments, and it just seems like he's out of position too often. So it's like, to me, I feel like even, you know I feel like he could learn some of this. Like you don't want him learning on the job, uh you know as the team sort of struggles through it, because it's not obviously optimal for the rest of the Hawks players for him to kind of play through mistakes. But I do feel like there's a learning curve where he could get to be a better defender, but he's a long ways off.
Yeah, it doesn't work at all right now. So, and I'm not one that I'm not one that bashes players, but he's just not functional at the way he needs to be on that end of the court, especially at the four. It just doesn't work.
Uh, that was a rough weekend. I know the fans have a lot of fun speculating in terms
Yeah.
of this player is available, point guard. Like, do you have a list of point guards? Let's just play for fun here for a minute and ignore the fact that the Hawks probably aren't spenders. They're worried about the salary cap. They don't have enough wiggle room to even sign a minimum player unless they get something else fixed with
Yeah.
Cody Zeller. But even with all those limitations, throw them away for a minute and just let's have fun. Are there people out there where you're like, here's a person who's available who could really help the Hawks as a backup point guard?
I mean, I have my favorites, but
Go,
some of
go.
them,
Yeah, give me favorites.
I mean, and fans have heard this before, seen me write about it on my Patreon, but like, Craig Porter Jr. is the best point guard in the league who's not playing at all, as a young guy in Cleveland. But I don't see Cleveland look, I mean, he is on an awesome contract. And so as the Cavaliers navigate trying to maintain a high performing team the next few years, his great value contract is not one they probably want to move. That's probably he's probably gonna be their backup point guard next year, you know.
Mhm.
And so I sort of, it's a dream, in that sense. But no, I think Trey Mann is a guy that most people don't realize how kind of skilled he is and how capable he is. Now he hasn't played on good teams, and his role has kind of ramped up and down from each's perspective. He's in Charlotte. And would Charlotte do business with the Hawks? I mean, I don't know why not. Mitch is in charge over there, and so you never know. But I feel like he's the kind of guy who has some scoring juice. He's a good self creator, good ball handler, and is kind of an emerging guy. But he's another young guy that's going to have some ups and downs. You get him into a role where like he has a lot of responsibility, and the team's trying to win. And but I feel like, Kevin, the whole league is going to kind of wait and see what happens with Jimmy Butler. And if Phoenix needs to move salary to create space for Jimmy Butler, can you get Monty Morris? Can you get Royce O'Neal? Kind of in that sense. And in a and
I
so I
bet
feel
Quinn would
like
like
the
to have
Hawks,
Royce O'Neal
because of
back.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's funny. I wrote about him on the page trying to put out today around. I had a kind of a mailbag, and I said, it'd be great if he was 6'7" instead of 6'4", but he can defend and shoot, and he knows what to do. He's a veteran, stable veteran. But I mean, the Suns, I mean, are on in a terrible stretch, like a horrible, stretch of play right now, and their owner is kind of a guy who I imagine him being like a guy who had a Texas Hold'em table is like pushing all his chips in every time he gets dunk cards, and
He has
so
new owner
so
syndrome.
yeah, and so I feel like the Hawks probably are trying to see if like, oh, is a team who tries to make room for Jimmy going to need to move a player who could help out? I feel like it's that kind of secondary kind of market kind of situation where something might manifest, sooner than later. In that way, you look at power forwards, and the good power forwards out there are generally expensive. They're like Cam Johnson, he makes $18 million. I
Well,
think,
yeah, that's. I mean,
how
they
do
don't
you,
need somebody. I mean, certainly they could use Cam Johnson, but just to sort of triage the gaping hole that they have, like they don't need somebody that good. Like, is there? What if you scale back expectations to somebody cheaper?
yeah, I mean, like, I mean, it's kind of funny because there's like 4 to 6 good backup point guards in the league. Like, it feels that way. It's like, New York's in a good situation with campaign. He's doing well for them, and there, otherwise there's a lot of young guys, but the kid Denver has playing, good on them. Like that dude can play. His name escapes me right now, but the
Wait,
young guy that hit, huh?
who's the backup point guard in Denver?
They make me look it up.
Oh,
I'll find it.
Pickett? You're talking about Jalen Pickett?
Sounds right.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, they listen. He's barely played. No, who's the guy that's playing for them?
Is it
That's weird.
Strother? I mean, I've always been a Strother fan, but he's not really a point guard. He's
No,
more of a shooting guard sort.
or is, yeah, this is bad
Up and
podcast. I
comer
mean,
Russell Westbrook?
yeah, let's Pickett. Yeah, yeah, Pickett played 13 minutes that game, but yeah, I thought he was playing a lot more for them than that. But I mean, he's just a
I mean, I guess
solid
maybe
young player.
Westbrook's eating those minutes. No?
Now, since he moved in the starting lineup, I think that's what's opened up the playing time for Pickett. Now that
Okay.
Russ is starting, right? But I mean, he's holding his own. Pickett's holding his own,
Yeah.
And so the point guard position is hard. So I do feel like it's gonna maybe that's gonna be tied to Jimmy getting moved, and that sort of thing. But power forward, like the drop off from Cam Johnson down, like from you know, a good reliable rotation, kind of power forward to the next tier is a bigger drop off. I mean, you try to think about who's the guy who makes between like $4 to $7 million in that range. You think about like, I mean, Kenrich Williams really isn't playing,
That's what I was just
anymore.
about. Oh my goodness. Like that was like 10. That name went through my head like 10 seconds ago. I was like, does
But he
Oklahoma
can
City use
defend.
Kenrich Williams as much as they should?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they don't need more draft picks,
Yeah, they
but
don't
like,
need any draft assets.
but I mean, when Travis was running Atlanta, he and Sam would do business a lot. I mean, they did a lot of business when Travis was there.
Right.
Is that hotline still in place? And that sort of thing. But it is hard for me to kind of figure out, who else out there as a power forward might be a guy who could play. And you're thinking about, is Daniel House like a rotation? I mean, and if Philly tries to improve that, Philly needs to improve their roster if they want to try to do something real this year. Is like, would he be a guy that to play for the Hawks? Is he working Quince? Yeah, that's what I mean. The Cam Johnson down to that next level is like guys who, in a lot of cases, aren't playing right now.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
that's tough.
It is very tough. Let me see if I can phrase this right. When you brought up Butler as sort of the player upon whom everybody is waiting, and you mentioned the Suns because that seems like probably the most logical suitor. Is there any way Or are there any other teams that you could kind of see as a destination for Butler? And so maybe the Hawks can play off of that. Are there any other realistic destinations for Butler?
Also, yeah, I'm trying. Yeah, Daniel House is not on. He's not on a roster right now. So, I'm just trying thinking back to the guys the last 2 to 3 years that showed some flashes, and aren't really playing now. Um, so Mark Stein put out a piece today, and the teams that he mentioned were Phoenix,
Hmm.
and that is probably a Bill scenario, Bradley Bill scenario,
Okay.
and the other was the Bulls, which was okay, is that a Zach Levine thing? I can't imagine the Heat wanting Zach Levine. Is that Vooch? I mean, I can't. Vooch doesn't make any sense to Miami for me unless there's a three-team trade that's in there. Or because there's really nothing else on that roster that has enough salary that kind of stacks up. Patrick Williams, maybe you kind of see him. Maybe if you could kind of squint and see him in a Heat uniform a little bit,
Yeah.
with what they do with those types of guys. And so, but Jimmy makes $48 million though, so you got to get two of those guys,
Yes.
kind of put together to start kind of making progress to get there. And so that's interesting. The most interesting thing that Stein wrote was that the ownership in Phoenix would immediately give Jimmy an extension, which is just again that's the poker player pushing all the chips in on sitting on a four clubs and a seven. It feels like to me and pushing all the chips in, and stuff like that. But that's who Stein was reporting with Chicago and Phoenix are at the front of the line. I've heard some noise about Memphis. People like DMing me about like Memphis and stuff like that, but I have a hard time with that. But because they'd
Seems like
have
it
to
would be
basically
such a
have to
weird
send,
fit.
yeah, and I mean it'd have to be Jaw. I mean, or Bain and whoever else they want, Bain and Smart, or and you could see Miami getting like 7 more years out of Marcus Smart, like no other franchise could do it, but they get his body right, however that works down there in South Beach. But that from Stein's reporting, which is all I've really heard, it's Chicago and Phoenix right now. I think the Warriors,
Chicago's kind of like you mentioned Patrick Williams. Like, is Chicago kind of ready to move on from Patrick Williams because they're kind of ready to make some room in the rotation for Buzelis? Like it's like, okay, he's going to be the guy, so let's clear the deck for him a little bit.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it could be, it could be. And but Jimmy wants to go play for a team that's a contender, is what he said. So what is the no? I shouldn't say I can't attribute that to him directly. I think he's basically said that through reporting. That's not Chicago, but does
That's not
Chicago think they could
Chicago.
do no? But does Chicago think they could do something in the offseason if they move Levine and who
I
knows,
mean, the
right?
East is open though. Like
Yeah,
you might be able to convince Butler and say, hey, like it's a long slog, but like where exactly is the 10 seed? Can you get there? If you want to try for it, go for it. Like you could kind of sell that as something to him. Like it's not like Chicago is Charlotte. Like it's not like that. Like they could at least get to a place where they control their own destiny, essentially.
yeah. And the other logical place because the relationship with Dallas, because Jimmy and Kyrie are really tight guys. But that would be a wonky fit to
Yeah, I
me.
was gonna say
Not
that,
to
like
be in
even money wise, like how
play
would you
or
make that
yeah,
trade work like that?
yeah, yeah. That's hard to make that happen.
Yeah.
I don't know how they would make that happen, but I think if you ask who's the player that Jimmy would really want to play with, I think Kyrie would, if he had truth serum, he'd probably, that'd probably the guy he'd want to go play with. But I don't know how Dallas swings that, without sending out three guys that is it addition or subtraction at that point for Dallas?
Yeah.
Debatable.
All right. Well, is there anything else that we want to cover here? Anything from the Lakers game? Did we miss any prime time topics?
Just dribble better, uh,
Dribble better. I like that. That might be the
be
title
better,
for this podcast. Dribble better.
dribble better, make passes that don't uh, have three opponents in the passing lane. I'm exaggerating a little bit for effect, but that's what it felt like watching it for a lot of people, I think. And so, dribble better and don't feed the other team into 40 transition points because that's hard. It's impossible to overcome that. So, Coach Glenn, keys to the game, mark it, mark it down.
Number one, dribble better.
Dribble better.
All right. Well, good night, Bob.
Good night, Bob.